Welcome back, guys. Arun this side, and Tony and I, both of us, are ready to start our show. And I'm excited for this show because I've got some amazing questions, and I hope you all will also enjoy. Please note, I think the sixth question is my favorite one, and also please do not forget to look at the tip of the day. All right, Tony. So, shall we start our today's show? Yeah. All right, guys. Both of us will see you on the other side. What's up, DBAs? Arun this side, and I am excited to start the another daily DBA show along with all of you. Trust me, guys, I have really enjoyed this journey of being an Oracle DBA, and I still remember why I started the Oracle DBA career, because the first time when I typed select star from EMP way back, we used to use Oracle 9 database. That point of time, I think this one sentence, select star from EMP, fascinated me so much that I wanted to become a DBA. And today at DBA Genesis, I am responsible for providing remote DBA support to our clients across the globe. As I always say, my personal goal with this show is to reach each and every single DBA on this planet so that we build a very strong Oracle DBA community and learn together. Alright, that being said, please continue to send in your questions, queries to support@dbagenesis.com. Without wasting further time, let me start with the first question of the day. By the way, how many of you notice I have Tony with me? Alright, so the first question we have is, if we perform a switchover operation in real time, how will we have to manage the connection string for end users? Since after switchover, standby will act as a primary database, do we have to modify connection string for all the users at client side, or is there any other thing which we need to be done? Wow, I think I like the first question because this question we get generally. Understand this, you have a primary database, you have a standby database. Now, if you set a static TNS entry for your client connectivity or the application connectivity, what will happen is your client can only connect to the primary database, but it won't be able to automatically connect to the standby database when you perform a switchover. In that case, you will have to update the client connections or the TNS entries at the client end. Understand this, what if you just have probably 20 or 50 client connections from different machines? Then do you think you will go and update all those client machine TNS entries to connect to the new primary when you perform a switchover? No, right? So the workaround for this one is to use TAF, transparent application failover, where you will be performing an automatic failover of the clients. And also, when you say failover of the clients, that means if users are connected to primary database, they are executing the select statement, and exactly at that point of time you perform the switchover, the selects will be failed over onto the new primary and users will get answer directly from the new primary, which was earlier your standby database. Now that happens only when you implement the transparent application failover. So how do you implement TAF? I will give you high level steps right now, and later on I'll direct you to one of the best articles that we have on our support website. So the high level steps include like this. What you do is, rather than connecting the TNS entry to a particular database, you actually create a service on the primary database. Now that service is responsible to run on the primary database only when the database is in either primary role or you perform a database role switch. All right, I'll repeat once again. So that particular service will be available, or it will run only on the database whenever the database is in primary role and whenever you perform a role switch. So understand this, when you are running this service on the primary, definitely it won't run on standby, because one of the rules of the service is it runs only on the primary. So when you perform the switchover, because your earlier standby now became a primary, right? So that service that was running on your earlier primary, it will start running on the new primary because you have performed the switchover, and on the new standby, which was earlier your primary database, the service will go down because that's how we define the service. So now first goal of defining client connectivity in DataGuard is to define a service which runs only on the database which is in primary role. Step 1 done. Second, you modify the TNS entries of the clients which connects only to this service. It won't connect to a particular database, because if you make it connect to the particular database, that means you are again going with the normal database connection, where in case if you perform the switchover, you have to modify the TNS entries. So what you do is you make the changes to the TNS entries of the client. Now client connects to the newly created service. And then the third step is to enable the TAF, transparent application failover, both in the server and in the TNS entries. But always remember guys, if you enable TAF on the server level, it takes the precedence above the TNS level TAF. So even if you set up load balancing or failover in the TNS entries, and you have also set up failover or the TAF on the server, definitely the server level takes the precedence. But it's always a good idea to have TAF configured both the sides, on the server and also in the TNS entries. So in the client TNS entries, now you will connect to the newly created service which only runs on the primary database. So if you look at the TNS entry, we have modified it in a way that it connects to a service which only runs on whichever is the primary database, right? So that way, even if you perform a switchover, the client connections will still be live inside the database. So how do you define TAF? How do you create a service? How to set up client connectivity in DataGuard? I have an amazing article on our support website. Go to support.dbagenesis.com and search for client connectivity in DataGuard configuration, and you would get an amazing article. Trust me, that article I personally use to configure for remote support clients. You can directly use that article to configure client connectivity for your DataGuard environment. Just use the article. All the steps are already tested on hundreds of DataGuard environment. I can personally assure you that you can use that article to set up client connectivity in any kind of environment. Amazing. I believe that helps you. So let's move on with the next question. How to add the disk group in ASM and how to tell the steps in interview. Once again, amazing question. See, to add a disk group, let's look at the fundamental steps. So disk group is a combination of disks, right? So technically, if you want to create a disk group, you need to have disks. So on a server, when you want to create a new disk group, what do you need? You need to ask storage team to create disks, the normal hard disks, which you will convert it into ASM disks. Okay, there is a difference. So first of all, you need to have the disks that are allocated to the server, or you can call it as storage that is allocated to the server. And using that storage, what you do is you use Oracle ASM utility to create ASM disks. So step 1, get the shared storage allocated. Step 2, create ASM disks using Oracle ASM create disk utility. Third one, start the ASM CA, ASM configuration assistant on the server, and using that utility, what you do is you create a disk group. Now when you create a disk group, you will have automatically the newly created disks listed in the configuration tool, and then you select the disks that you want to attach to the disk group and click on create. One more thing that you can do inside the tool is you can define the level of redundancy that you want. I'm not getting into the disk group redundancy. To keep it simple, you fire the tool and create the disk group. Now once the Oracle ASM disk group is created, the best part is it is tightly integrated to your Oracle database. So your Oracle database will automatically have the visibility of the newly created disk group. Of course, you need to make sure that ASM CA tool, when you create the disk group is mounted. The best part is whenever you create a new disk group, it is automatically mounted. So if it is not mounted, you can just mount it and then it will be visible to the Oracle database. It's that simple. So once again, let us revise these steps. The number one step is we need to have the storage allocated on the server so that we can create ASM disks. Second, we use Oracle ASM create disk utility in order to create the ASM disks. Then we use ASM CA, that is ASM configuration assistant tool, in order to create the disk group. And once we create the disk group, make sure it is mounted. And once the disk group is created, mounted, then it will be automatically visible to the Oracle database. I hope that helps you. So let's move on with the next question that we have. How can I reduce the gap between primary and standby database? Now, I personally believe, like by looking at this question, I can assume that there are two scenarios. One is you just want to know how to reduce the gap if it is a one-time gap, or second, you frequently have gaps in your environment and you want to know the steps in order to reduce the gap between the primary and standby. So for this, I'll talk about the first one. Let's take you have a gap once in a while. So how do you reduce it, or how do you resolve the gaps in DataGuard environment? Very simple. Most of the times I have seen that due to some server level activity or some database level activity on physical standby, the MRP shuts down, and due to MRP being down, the logs are not being applied. So step one is to check whether MRP is running on the standby or not. That's number one. Second, on primary, check what is the gap, what is the number of archives that are missing or that are not applied on to the standby. Once that is done, you have two options. Either you copy the archive logs manually and keep on applying. Make sure you just need to enable the MRP, and when you copy the archives, the missing archives from primary to standby, automatically they will be applied by the MRP process. That is step number one. If you have huge gap between the primary and standby, definitely you might have lot of archives that are already generated on the primary database. So it is technically impossible to copy all those archive logs onto the standby and apply, because by the time you do that, again you will have same number of archive logs on primary. So for some environments or some cases, this idea will not apply. So what is the next idea? The next idea is to take the incremental backup on the primary database. So what is the incremental backup? Let's take exactly your primary is at SCN number 5000. I'm just taking some number. So the primary SCN number is 5000 and the standby SCN number where the gap started is at 3000. So what we do is we take an incremental backup on the primary from the SCN number 3000 till the current SCN, that is 5000. So what you are doing is you are taking an incremental backup on primary from the 3000 SCN, the SCN number where the standby has stopped. Okay, so you take the incremental backup, copy it onto the standby, apply the incremental backup, and then immediately the standby will come in sync with the primary. This is the fastest way to bring your standby in sync with the primary when your environment generates a lot of archives. So this is my answer to the scenario one, where I assume that you have one-time gap somewhere in your environment and you just want to resolve the gap. So the easiest way is to take the incremental backup on primary, or else if you have less number of archives, you can manually copy those archives from primary to standby. Make sure MRP is running, because MRP knows when the archives comes into that location, it will auto apply them onto the standby, right? This is scenario one. Let's come to scenario two. I assume your environment is like frequently having gaps. So how do you resolve these kind of issues? First of all, you need to know why there is a gap. Is it due to very high level of archive generation, or is it due to the network transfer of the archive log? Is it taking a lot of time, or is it due to MRP not being capable of writing faster archive logs onto the standby? It depends which exact module or the area you have the error. See, in a DataGuard environment, it's very simple. Either you will have error onto the primary or the network or the standby. It's as simple as that. So my ideas for an environment where you see frequent gaps would be, what you can do is on the standby, you can enable something called as real-time log apply. What happens in real-time log apply is, First, let me talk about what normally happens, then you will understand what happens in real-time log apply. So in a normal data guard configuration, what happens is the RFS process, which is running on the standby database. So from primary, the archives are transferred. On the standby, RFS process is accepting the archive logs that are coming from the primary, and it is writing onto the standby redo log files, right? So when the RFS process completes writing into one standby redo log file and it switches to the next standby redo log file, then only the MRP will write the SRL to the standby database. So what happens in this kind of configuration is the MRP needs to wait for the SRL to be filled up, and then only the MRP can write it onto the standby. So what you can do is you can change this configuration. As and when RFS process is writing to the SRL, immediately MRP will apply that redo log entry. So it won't wait for the entire SRL to get filled. And what it will do is, as and when redo entries are coming into the SRL, it will start writing them onto the standby. Now this kind of configuration is called as real-time apply. Most of the gap level issues are resolved when you enable the real-time log apply. And guys, there is no impact of real-time log apply into any production database. You can easily enable it in case if your environment is frequently experiencing gaps, right? So that is idea number one, applying or enabling the real-time redo log apply onto the standby. The next is we also have an option to compress the archive logs and send it over the network, so that size of the archive log reduces over the network, so the network transfer will be faster. I would definitely want you guys to check on how you can compress and send it onto the standby server. And before I forget, for all the experienced DBAs, the way to enable the real-time redo log apply is alter database, recover, manage standby database using current log file. When you just use that term at the end, using current log file, and it will start real-time redo apply onto the standby database. I hope that helps you. So let's move on to the next question. What are the monitoring tools used by DBAs now and before? Simple one. So earlier people used to depend on the inbuilt monitoring tools that used to come with the Oracle database, like your alert log, your trace files, the StatsPack reports, and all the other reports that you can generate via the dynamic performance views inside the database. That's the way people used to manage in the olden days. Now I'm talking about way back when Oracle 6i, 7i versions were released. But later on, as technology is growing, a lot of tools emerged in the market. I'll also give you a couple of other tools that I've seen clients using, but let me tell you this. Oracle Enterprise Manager is the single most best Oracle database monitoring tool available in the market. I have used all other clients tools. Of course, people always complain saying like Oracle licenses are very costly, but there is a reason why it is costly, because it has the capability of executing some of the beautiful things that you might not imagine that other third-party vendor tools can do. Now coming to these days what clients use, first of all, as I mentioned, 100% most of the clients go by Oracle Enterprise Manager. Now I have seen clients that we provide Oracle support to also use DB Watch tool and Redgate SQL Monitor, and I have also seen clients using Foglight for Oracle database. I think these are the ones that I see very frequently with clients. Definitely why clients go to these kind of tools is to make sure they are able to monitor the entire database. And these days I also see there are a lot of free database monitoring tools that are emerging in the market. But trust me guys, those free and open source tools do not give you that much value in terms of what OEM can do for your environment. One more aspect of OEM that I want to talk right now is Oracle Enterprise Manager will not only monitor the databases which are hosted on server. The beauty about Oracle Enterprise Manager is it will also monitor the host or the server where the database is running. It will also monitor the database listener. It will also monitor your storage. You can also configure it to manage to some extent your applications. When it comes to rack database or a rack setup, it will also help you create the disk groups, monitor the disk group, manage the ASM disks. So it is like complete warehouse tool for your Oracle infrastructure. Now when you are using Oracle Data Guard Broker, so the beauty about Oracle Enterprise Manager is it can help you perform the switchovers also, and it can help you find and figure out the gaps. Not to forget that it gives you a lot of detailed reports when it comes to database performance tuning as well. All in all, to answer your question, so in the olden days, people used to depend only on the reports that came along with the database. But these days, we do have a lot of tools. My favorite one at any given point would be Oracle Enterprise Manager, but I have definitely seen clients using different tools. So let's do one thing. All the DBAs who are listening to this show, why don't you put down the database monitoring tool that you have worked on or that your client is currently using, so that we all will get to know which one is leading the market. All right. That being said, let's move on to the next question. Is there any query to get list of tables that should be reorganized? I have a problem in free space in the file system and I need to reduce the data file size. I mean, why do you need a query to find out which tables you would like to reorganize? You don't need, right? We have something called as Oracle Segment Advisor. You fire up that tool and you will get to know all the details of the tables or the segments that needs to be reorganized. So what you can do is go to support.dbagenesis.com and in the search bar type Oracle Segment Advisor and use that tool which comes with your Oracle database and figure out what are the recommendations of the tool where you can save how much space when it comes to the reorganization of the tables and to save space inside the database. That's the best tool and it's free, so use it. All right, let's move on. And guys, as mentioned earlier, this one is my favorite one. We have 2-node rack setup, and when I try to connect via connection string, I get connection lost error. When I try to connect again, the connection succeeds. What could be the issue? As I always say guys, with this limited amount of information, I really can't give you the exact answer, but let me help you with the debugging steps and you can try to figure out where your environment is facing the issue. So you mentioned that you have a 2-node rack setup, and whenever you're trying to connect via the connection string, you are getting the connection lost error. So the connection lost is pretty simple. Either you will have an issue with the TNS entries. Check what are your TNS entries. I think there might be issue with your TNS entries. Sometimes there is also issue with the sqlnet.aura file. That's the one which resides under Oracle Home Oracle Home Network Admin location along with your listener file. Check if the listener file on the node 1 and node 2 are exactly same. Sometimes what happens is due to a gap in a space or extra line within the listener file or the TNS entry files, it also creates a problem. So make sure the TNS entries are correct. Also, I would like to ask you if you are using load balancing at the client side, and if you are doing so, check those load balancing parameters. Sometimes there is issue with the load balancing parameters, that's also there. Next is check the listener entries or the listener file on both the nodes. It should be exactly same. And on a very simple note, because I have seen these kind of issues very frequently, this will be definitely a problem somewhere with your client side or the server side, where either the problem is with the TNS names.aura file, or it is the problem with if you are using the load balancing inside the TNS names.aura file, or it has to do with the listeners that are running on node 1, node 2 or other nodes in your rack environment, or the special one is the sqlnet.aura file. Just see what parameters you are using inside the sqlnet.aura file, because that also impacts the connection. Now with that answer guys, I had these questions which I had picked up for this show and I loved it. Please keep sending me all of your important questions to support@dbagenesis.com or put down your queries, question, confusion, doubts below this video into the YouTube comments. I would definitely try to pick up as many questions as possible and answer them in the upcoming episodes. And now the most exciting part of the show, the bonus question. Hey guys, I'm back. So I have chosen this one question as the bonus question for this episode because I think I have talked about this in my previous episodes also. And I guess in one of the DBA tips that I give at the end of the show, I mentioned about this thing. So let me first read out the question for all of you. And the question goes something like this. What is the meaning of migration when we say Oracle database migrations? Amazing. I think like to understand this question, you need to see this. Let's talk about two different things. When we say database migrations, it's a complete different stuff. When we just talk about migration, it could be about anything. So let us try to understand all this from the perspective of what is migration. Migration means changing the host. I think that's the best way to put it. So anything that you pick up, put it somewhere else is known as migrations because you migrated something from one location to the other location. Now, what are the different types of migrations? Like you can have application migration, like application was residing on a completely different server and later on you moved it onto a different server. That is application migrations. You have storage migrations. Earlier your application was on a normal hard disk and now you have moved it to SSDs. That is called as storage migration. Next, you also have database migrations where you either migrate the database from one server to the other server or one platform to the other platform or from physical to cloud. So ultimately the migration word actually means change in the location or change in the host or change in the place or change in the network. Anything like you have a change where you discontinue something and start using something is like migration. You have moved from something to something else. That is migrations in very normal terms. Now let's talk about Oracle migrations. Let's take you migrate from one system or one server to the another server. That is migrations. Let's take you migrate from Windows to Linux. It is called as migrations. Let's take you migrate from a physical server to AWS cloud. That comes under migrations, right? So Oracle database migration means change in where your Oracle database was earlier hosted. So earlier if your database was hosted on AIX and then you move it onto Solaris is also migrations. Very simple guys. Again, keep it simple as I always say. Migration in literal terms means moving thing from previous stuff to a new stuff. Alright guys, that's all I had for this episode, and please do not forget to comment your doubts, confusion, comments below this video. And in case if you are listening to this on the podcasting platform, do send in your queries on support@dbagenesis.com, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye bye.